There is a quiet moment each morning that most people never truly notice. It arrives before the messages, before the headlines, before the demands of work and family begin to compete for your attention. It lasts only a few minutes, yet it often determines the emotional direction of the entire day. The tragedy is not that this moment is brief. The tragedy is that it is usually surrendered without resistance. Think carefully about the first thing your mind consumes after waking. Is it your own thoughts or someone else's? Many people begin each morning by inviting the concerns of strangers into their consciousness before they have even spoken a single word to themselves. They scroll through endless opinions, alarming news, and carefully curated images of lives that appear more successful, more organized, and more fulfilling than their own. By the time they rise from bed, they have already handed away the one possession that can never be recovered, the quality of their attention. The Stoics understood something that modern society often forgets. Your attention is not merely a mental resource, it is the architect of your character. Whatever repeatedly occupies your mind gradually shapes the person you become. Marcus Aurelius did not awaken expecting peace to appear by accident. He prepared himself for difficulty before difficulty had the opportunity to prepare itself for him. He reminded himself that impatience, selfishness, and misunderstanding would cross his path, not because the world was unusually cruel, but because such things are part of the human condition. Notice the quiet wisdom within that practice. He was not predicting disaster, he was removing surprise. Much of our suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our insistence that life should unfold differently. Every unexpected inconvenience becomes a personal insult because we secretly believed the day owed us comfort. Yet the morning ritual of a Stoic replaces expectation with readiness. Imagine beginning each day by accepting that something will almost certainly challenge your patience. Perhaps a delayed train, an unpleasant email, a careless remark from a colleague, a plan that falls apart without warning. None of these events can be guaranteed, yet neither can they be avoided forever. If you have already rehearsed their arrival in your mind, they lose much of their power. Instead of reacting with frustration, you recognize them as familiar visitors. This simple shift transforms your relationship with adversity. The obstacle no longer interrupts your day. It becomes part of the day's design. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you quietly ask, "How shall I respond?" One question produces resentment, the other produces character. Observe how different these questions feel. The first assumes that happiness depends upon circumstances. The second assumes that dignity depends upon conduct. That distinction is subtle, yet it changes everything. There is another habit worth cultivating before the world begins speaking to you. Spend a few moments sitting in complete silence. No music, no podcasts, no notifications, merely silence. At first, this may feel uncomfortable. The mind, accustomed to constant stimulation, immediately searches for distraction. It invents problems, replays conversations, and imagines future disappointments. Do not resist these thoughts with violence. Simply watch them appear and disappear. Epictetus taught that we are disturbed not by events, but by our judgments about them. Morning silence allows you to witness those judgments before they become automatic. You begin to notice recurring patterns. Perhaps you habitually assume the worst. Perhaps you constantly seek approval. Perhaps your first instinct is fear disguised as caution. Awareness does not eliminate these habits overnight, but it prevents them from governing your life unnoticed. Consider how extraordinary this is. Most people spend years attempting to change their circumstances without ever examining the lens through which those circumstances are viewed. They renovate their careers, relationships, and possessions while leaving the architecture of their thinking untouched. Yet every external improvement is eventually filtered through the same undisciplined mind. Now imagine replacing those first few minutes of unconscious reaction with deliberate reflection. Ask yourself only one question: what kind of person deserves to exist today? Not what achievements you hope to collect, not how much money you intend to earn, not how many tasks you plan to complete. Instead, ask who you intend to become before asking what you intend to accomplish. This question quietly rearranges your priorities. Success ceases to be measured only by outcomes. It begins to be measured by integrity, patience, courage, and restraint. A difficult meeting becomes an opportunity to practice composure. A disagreement becomes an opportunity to exercise fairness. A disappointment becomes an opportunity to strengthen resilience. Little by little, your mornings cease to be a frantic race against time. They become a return to yourself. And in a world determined to scatter your attention in every direction, that return may be the most disciplined act of all. There is a reason why so many people feel mentally exhausted before midday, even when they have barely begun their work. Their energy has not been stolen by effort. It has been drained by reaction. From the moment they wake, they surrender control over their emotional state to circumstances they cannot influence. Every notification becomes a command. Every unexpected delay becomes a source of irritation. Every opinion they encounter demands an emotional response. They mistake constant engagement for living, when in reality, they are merely being pulled from one impulse to the next. The Stoics recognized that freedom begins much earlier than most people imagine. It does not begin when your schedule becomes lighter, when your finances improve, or when life finally becomes fair. Freedom begins in the brief pause between an event and your response. That pause is almost invisible, yet it is where your entire character is formed. Most people never notice it because they have trained themselves to react instantly. Someone criticizes them, and irritation appears before thought. A plan changes, and disappointment immediately follows. A stranger behaves rudely, and anger seems inevitable. Yet inevitability is often nothing more than habit repeated for so long that it feels natural. Consider this. Imagine two people facing the very same morning. They wake to discover that an important meeting has been cancelled. One complains about wasted preparation, resents the inconvenience, and carries that frustration into every conversation that follows. The other pauses for a moment, accepts that the decision lies beyond personal control, and quietly asks how the unexpected time might now be used well. Outwardly, their circumstances are identical. Inwardly, they inhabit entirely different worlds. This is why the Stoics placed such extraordinary importance upon perception. Reality matters, but interpretation often matters more. The event itself is rarely the true source of suffering. It is the story we immediately attach to it. A cancelled meeting becomes evidence that life is unfair. A delayed reply becomes proof that someone no longer values us. A mistake becomes confirmation that we are incapable. Observe how quickly the mind invents conclusions from incomplete information. Now notice something equally important. These stories usually appear without invitation. They arrive automatically because they have been rehearsed thousands of times before. Every morning presents an opportunity to interrupt that cycle before it gains momentum. One simple practice can quietly reshape the entire architecture of your thinking. Before beginning your day's responsibilities, write down 3 things that are completely within your control. Not vague ambitions, but concrete actions. You can choose your patience. You can choose your honesty. You can choose the care with which you speak to another person. These are genuine possessions because no external circumstance can remove them from you without your consent. Then write down 3 things that lie entirely beyond your control. Other people's opinions, economic uncertainty, traffic, weather, past mistakes, future outcomes. Once you see these written clearly before you, something curious begins to happen. The mind stops wasting so much energy negotiating with reality. Acceptance ceases to feel like surrender. Instead, it becomes efficiency. Seneca often reminded his readers that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Reflect upon how true this remains today. Before an important conversation, we rehearse endless disasters that never occur. Before making a difficult decision, we imagine every possible failure while ignoring the countless opportunities hidden within uncertainty. Our mornings become crowded with imaginary burdens before the real day has even begun. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with stones. Every few minutes, someone quietly places another stone inside. At first, you barely notice, but after several hours, the weight becomes overwhelming. This is precisely how unnecessary mental burdens accumulate. A small worry, an imagined argument, a comparison with someone else's success, a regret from years ago. None seems particularly significant alone. Together, they become almost unbearable. Your morning ritual is the moment to empty that backpack before beginning the journey. Ask yourself, which of these burdens belongs to today? You may discover that very few do. Perhaps you are still carrying embarrassment from a conversation that everyone else has already forgotten. Perhaps you continue replaying an opportunity that disappeared years ago. Perhaps you remain anxious about outcomes that exist only in your imagination. The disciplined mind is not the mind that never worries. It is the mind that refuses to carry unnecessary weight. Observe nature for a moment. Dawn never hurries. The sun does not compete with yesterday's sunset, nor does it fear tomorrow's clouds. It simply rises according to its nature. Human beings, however, often begin each morning by comparing themselves with a version of life that exists only inside their own expectations. They wake already behind, already dissatisfied, already convinced they should have achieved more by now. What if the day did not begin with comparison, but with presence? What if, instead of measuring yourself against another person's accomplishments, you measured yourself against yesterday's character? Did you become slightly more patient, slightly more truthful, slightly more disciplined? These victories are almost invisible to the outside world, yet they quietly accumulate into a life of remarkable stability. Modern culture celebrates dramatic transformation. Stoicism celebrates steady refinement. It reminds us that greatness is rarely born from extraordinary mornings. It is built from ordinary mornings repeated with extraordinary consistency. Every sunrise offers the same silent invitation, not to become someone entirely new overnight, but to become slightly more aligned with the person you know you are capable of being. That invitation asks for no applause. It seeks no audience. It requires only your willingness to answer it before the noise of the world begins once again. There is a subtle temptation that appears every morning, and because it wears the disguise of productivity, very few people recognize it. It whispers that the value of the day will be measured by how much you accomplish, how many tasks you complete, how many problems you solve. At first, this seems reasonable. Responsibility matters, discipline matters, meaningful work matters. But when your entire sense of worth becomes attached to achievement, your peace becomes hostage to circumstances beyond your control. Think about how often you have reached the end of a demanding day feeling strangely dissatisfied. You completed everything that was expected of you. You answered every message. You attended every meeting. You fulfilled every obligation, yet something still felt absent. The exhaustion was not simply physical, it was existential. You had spent the entire day producing, yet almost none of it had strengthened the person producing those results. The Stoics never argued against ambition. They argued against dependence. There is a profound difference between pursuing excellence and needing success in order to feel complete. One creates freedom. The other creates quiet desperation. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire that stretched across continents, yet his private writings reveal remarkably little concern for status. Again and again, he returned to the same question: what is required of me in this moment? Not, how will history remember me? Not, will others admire my decisions? Only, what is the right thing to do now? This question is astonishingly powerful because it rescues the mind from unnecessary complexity. The future becomes smaller. Regret loses its grip. Anxiety has fewer places to hide. The only responsibility that remains is to meet the present moment with integrity. Consider how different your mornings would feel if you carried this question into them before anything else. Not, how can I impress people today? Not, how can I avoid discomfort? Not even, how can I become successful? Instead, ask quietly, what does wisdom require of me before this day ends? The answer is rarely dramatic. Perhaps wisdom requires listening more carefully than you speak. Perhaps it requires apologizing without defending yourself. Perhaps it asks you to finish a task you have avoided for weeks, because discomfort always seemed easier to postpone than to confront. Or perhaps wisdom simply asks you to remain calm when someone else loses theirs. These moments rarely appear important while they are happening, yet they are the moments from which character is built. Observe an old oak tree standing alone through every season. No one notices its growth from one morning to the next. Days pass without visible change. Weeks appear identical. Even months reveal little difference to the casual observer. Yet beneath the surface, roots continue reaching deeper into the earth, making the tree stronger long before anyone can see the evidence. Human character develops in precisely the same way. People often search for dramatic breakthroughs because gradual transformation feels too ordinary. They hope for a single conversation, one inspiring book, or one extraordinary morning that will permanently change their lives. But genuine resilience rarely arrives like lightning. It grows quietly, almost invisibly, through countless decisions that seem insignificant at the time. Each morning you choose patience instead of irritation. Each morning you choose attention instead of distraction. Each morning you choose responsibility instead of excuse. None of these choices earns applause. No one congratulates you for resisting the urge to complain. There are no headlines celebrating the moment you remain composed during an unnecessary argument. Yet these invisible victories accumulate. Years later, people will describe you as calm, disciplined, or dependable, unaware that these qualities were never gifts. They were habits repeated so consistently that they became indistinguishable from personality. Now notice another misunderstanding that quietly weakens many people. They believe discipline is something that removes freedom. In reality, the opposite is true. Without discipline, every impulse becomes a master. Your mood determines your actions. Your fears determine your decisions. Your comfort determines your limits. You become a passenger inside your own life, constantly reacting to whatever emotion happens to arrive first. Discipline reverses that relationship. It teaches the emotions that they may speak, but they do not get the final vote. Imagine waking on a cold morning when every instinct urges you to remain beneath the blankets. There is nothing immoral about comfort. The danger lies in allowing comfort to become your authority. The moment you rise despite that resistance, something subtle changes within you. The victory is not over the weather. It is not even over the bed. The victory is over the assumption that every feeling deserves obedience. That lesson extends far beyond your morning routine. The difficult conversation becomes easier because you no longer expect courage to arrive before action. The meaningful project becomes possible because you stop waiting to feel perfectly motivated. The healthy habit begins because you understand that consistency matters more than enthusiasm. This is one of the quiet paradoxes of Stoicism. The disciplined person often experiences greater peace, not because life becomes easier, but because fewer internal battles remain unresolved. Decisions consume less energy. Values become clearer. Purpose becomes steadier. And perhaps that is what the morning has been trying to teach all along. Each dawn is not merely another beginning. It is another opportunity to prove, quietly and without witnesses, that your highest principles are stronger than your strongest excuses. There is another misunderstanding that quietly shapes the way people approach each new morning. They believe that discipline is something they either possess or lack, as though it were an inherited trait rather than a cultivated practice. They look at someone who remains calm under pressure, who keeps promises to themselves, who rises early with purpose, and they conclude that such people were simply born differently. Nothing could be further from the truth. The disciplined mind is not created through extraordinary moments of inspiration. It is created through ordinary decisions repeated long after inspiration has disappeared. Think about the first hour of your morning once more. Every action within it is a vote. Each choice, however small, casts another vote for the kind of person you are becoming. When you postpone responsibility because comfort feels more appealing, you cast one vote. When you keep the promise you made to yourself despite resistance, you cast another. No single vote determines your identity, but thousands of them eventually do. This is why the Stoics paid so little attention to grand declarations. They understood that character is revealed far more honestly by repeated habits than by ambitious intentions. Anyone can promise change during an emotional moment. Very few remain faithful to that promise when the excitement fades and only routine remains. Consider how nature works. Rivers do not carve valleys through sudden violence. They do so through steady persistence. A single drop of water appears powerless. Millions of drops, moving in the same direction over many years, reshape landscapes. Your habits operate in exactly the same way. One morning of reflection changes very little. One morning of discipline is encouraging but insignificant. 1 week creates momentum. 1 month creates familiarity. 1 year creates a different person. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because your responses gradually became wiser. Now imagine beginning every day with a simple reminder. I do not need to control everything that happens today. I only need to govern myself. Read those words slowly. Notice how much pressure disappears the moment you truly accept them. You no longer carry responsibility for another person's behavior. You no longer waste precious energy trying to predict every possible outcome. You no longer demand certainty before taking action. Instead, your responsibility becomes wonderfully clear. Speak honestly, work diligently, remain patient, accept reality, correct yourself when necessary, then continue. There is remarkable peace hidden inside such simplicity. Modern life encourages the opposite. It rewards constant comparison, endless stimulation, and the illusion that every opinion deserves immediate attention. The result is a mind permanently divided against itself. One part worries about yesterday, another fears tomorrow, another envies someone else's achievements. Very little remains available for the only place life can actually be lived. The present. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly returned to this truth because he understood something timeless. Every meaningful action can only occur now. You cannot show kindness yesterday. You cannot practice courage tomorrow. You cannot become more disciplined in an imagined future. Every virtue exists only in the present moment. That is why the morning matters so profoundly. It is not because early hours possess magical qualities. It is because they offer the cleanest opportunity to choose who you will be before the world begins making demands upon your attention. Observe someone who lives without such intention. They wake hurried, they move hurried, they eat hurried, they speak hurried. Eventually, they begin believing that life itself is hurrying them forward. Yet time is not chasing them, their own mind is. Contrast this with someone who protects the first moments of each day. Their movements are not necessarily slower, their responsibilities are no lighter. Their problems are no smaller, but there is space between stimulus and response. That space changes everything. Inside it lives patience. Inside it lives judgment. Inside it lives freedom. When unexpected difficulties arrive, and they always do, they are no longer meeting a distracted mind. They are meeting a prepared one. And preparation is one of the greatest expressions of self-respect. Many people think self-respect comes from confidence. Others believe it comes from achievement. The Stoics quietly suggested something different. Self-respect comes from trusting your own character. Can you trust yourself to remain calm? Can you trust yourself to tell the truth even when it is uncomfortable? Can you trust yourself to continue when motivation disappears? Can you trust yourself to keep the promises no one else even knows you made? Every morning provides another opportunity to answer those questions, not with words, with actions. Over time, something extraordinary begins to happen. You stop seeking constant reassurance because your own conduct becomes reassurance enough. You stop needing perfect conditions because you have learned to work within imperfect ones. You stop fearing difficult days because you understand that difficult days are precisely where disciplined minds are strengthened. The world outside may remain unpredictable. Your inner world no longer needs to be. Perhaps the greatest gift of a morning ritual is not productivity, it is remembrance. Each dawn reminds you of something the world constantly encourages you to forget. You are not here merely to accumulate possessions, titles, or admiration. You are here to cultivate a character capable of meeting whatever life asks of you. That cultivation never truly ends. Even Marcus Aurelius, an emperor admired across generations, filled his private journal with reminders rather than declarations of mastery. He did not write because he had perfected himself. He wrote because he understood that wisdom must be renewed every day. Left unattended, even the strongest mind slowly drifts towards distraction, comfort, and illusion. The same is true for all of us. There is no morning after which discipline becomes effortless. There is no point where emotional control requires no further practice. There is no final destination where self-mastery is complete. And strangely, that should bring comfort rather than disappointment. It means every sunrise offers another beginning. Not because yesterday failed, but because today's choices still matter. Imagine reaching the end of your life and looking back, not at your achievements first, but at the person those achievements required you to become. Would you admire your own patience, your honesty, your restraint, your courage when no applause was waiting? These are the questions that outlive careers. They outlive wealth. They even outlive reputation, because they define the quality of the life that was actually lived. Tomorrow morning, before you reach for your phone, before the noise of the world asks for your attention, pause for a single minute. Take one slow breath. Remind yourself that your thoughts are yours to govern, that your reactions remain your responsibility, that today's obstacles are opportunities to practice the virtues you claim to value. Then rise with quiet intention, not to defeat the world, not to prove yourself superior, but to become slightly wiser than you were yesterday. If you return to this practice each morning, you may notice that your life does not transform through dramatic breakthroughs. Instead, it changes almost too gradually to detect. Conversations become calmer, decisions become clearer, setbacks lose much of their power. Peace begins arriving more often, not because circumstances improve, but because your relationship with them has changed. That is the quiet promise of Stoicism. Not a life without hardship, a mind that is no longer ruled by it. And if these reflections have spoken to something within you, consider subscribing and returning for future conversations. Not because wisdom can be delivered in a single video, but because the practice of returning to it is itself part of the discipline. When tomorrow's sun rises, the world will ask for your attention. Before you give it away, make certain that you have first given a few moments to the person who must live the entire day within your own mind. Because the quality of your mornings will quietly become the quality of your life.